Utilizing the inheritance from my late husband, Marcus, I acquired a farm, seeking solace and tranquility. My son, Andre, then contacted me with an unusual request. Mum, you'll need to stay in the garage for a few days. I'm bringing Kiara's parents and some friends over. If you cause any embarrassment, I'll have you admitted to an assisted living facility. I remained silent, but upon their arrival, they were met with an unexpected situation. I'm pleased you're all here. Please follow my story to its conclusion and share the city from which you're reading. This will help me gauge the reach of my narrative. My name is Dahlia Ellington, and I am 60 years old. I never fathomed that the most profound betrayal in my life would originate from my own son. It all began 3 months after Marcus's funeral. My husband of 35 years was gone, and the void he left was palpable. In our bed, in the kitchen where we shared our morning meals, in every nook of the home we had lovingly constructed. The life insurance policy, which Marcus had kept discreet, was a substantial surprise. $500,000. It was a sum far beyond anything we had ever possessed, ample funds to fundamentally alter my existence. For weeks, the money remained untouched in my bank account, as I mourned the loss of the only man who had truly cherished me. Marcus had always harbored a dream of a modest farm nestled in the North Georgia countryside, a place where we could cultivate our own produce and raise a few animals. When I retire, he'd often say, gently stroking my hair, we'll buy that farm and escape the city's clamor. However, Marcus passed away before he could retire, before this cherished aspiration could be realized. It was then that I resolved to fulfill this dream for him, for us, for the many years we had spent envisioning that peaceful rural life. A new beginning and a stark ultimatum. The farm I found was located approximately 2 hours outside of Atlanta, Georgia, enveloped by verdant hills and graced by a small creek meandering through the property. The main residence was unpretentious yet sturdy, featuring 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen with views of the garden, and a porch where I could readily picture myself observing every sunset. Stables stood ready for horses, though my knowledge of their care was non-existent, and the land offered ample space for any planting I desired. The purchase price was $350,000, leaving me with $150,000 for renovations and initial operational expenses. I affixed my signature to the purchase agreement on a Tuesday morning, my hands trembling with elation. It marked the first significant decision I had made independently of Marcus, yet I was confident he would have been proud. That very afternoon, unable to contain my elation, I contacted Andre, my sole offspring. "Mom!" His voice conveyed surprise. Andre, aged 38, held a managerial position at an insurance firm. He and his wife, Kiara, had resided in the city for 5 years. "Everything is perfectly fine, Andre," I replied, my heart pounding with unadulterated joy. "Son, I have wonderful news. I've purchased a farm, a beautiful farm in the countryside, just as your father and I always dreamed." A prolonged silence ensued on the other end of the line. I feared the connection had been lost. "You bought what?" His tone had undergone a complete transformation, becoming flat and devoid of warmth. "A farm, Andre. It's perfect. It possesses everything I need, and there's ample space for when you and Kiara come to visit. You could stay for weekends, bring the grandchildren when you have them." "Mum, have you lost your mind?" His voice turned harsh and cruel. "What funds did you utilize to acquire this farm? Don't tell me you squandered Dad's insurance on that absurd endeavor." I was rendered speechless. Absurd endeavor. That was his designation for the shared aspiration of his father and myself, an aspiration that had spanned decades. "Andre, I anticipated you would be pleased. It's a splendid location and there's ample room for the entire family." "Mom, listen to me carefully." he interjected. I could discern Kiara speaking in the background, though her words were unintelligible. I have arrangements for the upcoming weekend. Kiara intends to bring her parents and some friends to view the farm. My heart swelled with renewed hope. Perhaps his initial reaction was an anomaly, and now he was eager to visit. How wonderful, son. I'll prepare the guest rooms and prepare a special meal. It's been far too long since I've seen Kiara. No, Mum. Listen to me closely, as I will not repeat myself. His voice was chillingly deliberate. You will prepare the garage for your accommodation. Do you comprehend? Kiara wishes to avoid her parents perceiving that we are incapable of affording a decent vacation locale. If you cause us any embarrassment, if you utter any inappropriate remarks, or behave like the pathetic elderly woman you've become, I will place you in a nursing home with such alacrity that you won't even grasp how you arrived there. The words struck me with the force of physical blows. I felt as though I couldn't draw breath, as though the walls of my new kitchen were constricting around me. My own son was instructing me to sleep in a garage, treating me as if I was some stray animal. Andre, I whispered, my voice cracking, why are you speaking to me in this manner? I am your mother. You are a burden, Mum. You have been since Dad passed. Kiara and I had plans for that insurance money. Concrete plans, not farm fantasies befitting a 5-year-old child. But the money, it belonged to Dad, and I am his son. I possessed a greater entitlement to determine its allocation than you did. I could hear Kiara's laughter in the background. We'll see you Friday evening. Have the garage prepared and do not disgrace us. He abruptly disconnected, offering no farewell. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the incessant dial tone as tears streamed down my face. In my new kitchen, amidst unpacked boxes and aspirations yet to be realized, I felt more profoundly alone than ever before. Yet within that overwhelming sorrow, a new sentiment began to emerge, something that had lain dormant for years, years spent embodying the role of the devoted wife, the perfect mother, the woman who consistently deferred and forgone. A spark, perhaps, that Marcus had recognized in me during our younger years, but which I had subsequently buried beneath layers of domesticity and self-sacrifice. Andre had committed an error, a monumental one, because if he intended to engage in duplicity, he was about to discover that his mother was far more adept at such games than he could ever imagine. The revelation, the 3 days that followed that unsettling phone call, were among the most peculiar of my life. Externally, I maintained the semblance of the same Dahlia I had always been, unpacking boxes, organizing the household, and attempting to acclimatize to rural life. Internally, however, a fundamental shift had occurred. That night, after Andre's call, sleep eluded me. I remained awake until dawn, seated on the porch, gazing at the stars and replaying my son's pronouncements. A burden, a pathetic old woman. I will place you in a nursing home. Each phrase inflicted an open wound that refused to cease its bleeding. But as the sun ascended, a resolute determination, dormant for decades, was born with the new day. On Wednesday morning, while preparing the garage to serve as my temporary abode, I discovered an old crate left behind by the previous occupants. Within it lay some inconsequential papers and an antique landline telephone that remained functional. I connected it in the garage, a pragmatic decision should the need arise. It was on that same day that I inadvertently overheard my first clandestine conversation. I was arranging some old blankets when the telephone in the main house rang. An extension was present in the garage, and by an extraordinary stroke of coincidence, I lifted the receiver precisely as someone answered in the house. It was Andre. "Kiara, it's me," my son stated, and something in his intonation compelled me to remain absolutely still, refraining from disconnecting. "Did you speak with the old woman?" My daughter-in-law's voice was dismissive, tinged with boredom. Yes, I instructed her to sleep in the garage. She wept, as is her custom, but she will comply. Kiara chuckled. Perfect! My parents will be impressed with the property. How much did you tell them it cost? I informed them it cost $500,000, not $350,000. I want them to believe we possess more wealth than we actually do. Astute! And after the weekend, when do we initiate the plan? My blood ran cold. What plan? Give her another month, Andre replied. Allow her to settle in, let her feel secure. Then we commence the psychological coercion. You are aware of those physicians who deem individuals mentally incompetent, are you not? My cousin is a psychiatrist. He will sign any necessary documentation for $5,000. Excellent. Once we declare her incompetent, I, as the sole heir, will possess legal dominion over all her assets. We will liquidate this farm and retain all the proceeds. And what becomes of her? We will place her in the most economical nursing home we can locate. Ideally, she will not endure there for an extended period. Elderly individuals deteriorate rapidly once removed from their familiar surroundings. Kiara emitted another laugh, a cruel sound that pierced me like a blade. You are diabolical, Andre. I approve. I learned from the best. My father was excessively lenient with her. I will not repeat his error. Do you believe she suspects anything? My mother is far too naive and sentimental. She still envisions me as her perfect little boy. I could pilfer her dentures, and she would somehow rationalize it. They terminated the call, and I remained seated on the garage floor, clutching the telephone with trembling hands. My own son, my only son, the infant I had carried for 9 months, the child for whom I had kept vigil during fevers, the boy I had defended against every teacher and principal who registered complaints about his conduct. That very child was now orchestrating a scheme to seize all that I possessed and confine me to a facility to perish in solitude. However, something else troubled me. Andre had alluded to learning from the best. What did he mean by that? Marcus had never been cruel to me. Never. The hidden folder. That evening I resolved to delve into the boxes that remained unpacked. They comprised largely of Marcus's documents, work-related papers, old bills, and family photographs. But at the bottom of one of the boxes, I discovered something that made my breath catch. It was a folder marked Andre Confidential in Marcus's handwriting. Inside I found letters, printed emails, and handwritten notes. With my heart accelerating with each passing moment, I began to read. The initial letter was from Andre, dated 3 years prior. Dad, I urgently require a loan of $10,000. It's a secure investment. I will repay you within 6 months with interest. Mum cannot be privy to this, as you understand her anxieties regarding finances. Marcus's reply, scrawled in the margin, read, Andre, this is the 5th time you've solicited funds from me this year. What is truly transpiring? And do not claim it's for an investment. As on the previous 4 occasions, you asserted the same, and I never saw a single cent returned. I continued to read. The contents revealed that Andre had persistently petitioned Marcus for money over the preceding 5 years. Each time he presented varying justifications, employment challenges, a medical exigency involving Kiara, investments that proved to be fraudulent schemes, and undisclosed gambling debts. In total, Marcus had advanced him over $80,000, which Andre had never reimbursed. However, the most poignant discovery was a letter Marcus had penned but never dispatched. Dahlia, my dearest, if you are reading this, it signifies that I am no longer with you. There are aspects of Andre's character that I have withheld from you, as I wish to spare you pain. Our son is not the man we perceive him to be. He has deceived me. He has defrauded me, and he has manipulated me for years. But the gravest offense is that he has threatened me. He informed me that if I ever divulged the truth about him to you, he would contrive a method to inflict harm upon you. That is why I maintained my silence. That is why I allowed him to remain your cherished little boy. But I harbor apprehension for you, Dahlia. I fear what he may do once I am no longer present to safeguard you. Please exercise caution. Do not place your trust in him. And remember that you have always possessed a strength far exceeding your own belief. Tears saturated the paper as I absorbed the final sentiments. Marcus had been aware of Andre's true nature all along, but he had preserved this secret to protect me. At that precise moment, I heard a vehicle pull up outside. Andre and Chiara had arrived a day earlier than anticipated. I swiftly concealed all the documents and hurried to the garage, feigning exhaustion. Through the small window pane, I observed them entering the house as if it were already their own, illuminating lights, opening cabinets, and discussing prospective alterations once it officially belonged to them. But I was no longer the same woman who had wept in this very garage just 3 days prior. Now I possessed information, I had irrefutable proof, and a plan was beginning to coalesce in my mind. Andre and Chiara had arrived with the intention of humiliating me, of treating me as a domestic servant in my own home, of initiating the systematic dismantling of my life. What they failed to realize was that their intended victim had irrevocably vanished: the confrontation dinner. On Friday evening, Kara's parents arrived, accompanied by 2 other couples. From my vantage point in the garage, I observed them disembarking from a gleaming black Mercedes-Benz, attired in costly clothing, and remarking on the picturesque nature of the estate. Kara greeted them at the front door with the demeanor of the lady of the house, while Andre, with a smile I recognized all too well, the same disingenuous smile he had employed since childhood when seeking to manipulate, handled the luggage. I remained in the garage until Andre sought me out. "Mom, come out of there. Chiara wishes for you to prepare dinner for 8 individuals." His tone was a peculiar admixture of command and disdain. "And dress appropriately. You appear disheveled." I was wearing the same cerulean blouse Marcus had gifted me on our final anniversary, one of my favorites. However, under Andre's critical scrutiny, I abruptly felt diminished and unkempt. I entered the house I had purchased with my own funds and proceeded to the kitchen. The guests were gathered in the living room, partaking in wine and engaging in animated conversation. I could discern fragments of their dialogue. Andre was just recounting this brilliant investment. Mr. Clayton, Chiara's father, a man of portly build with a distinguished grey moustache, declared, $500,000 for a property already valued at $700,000. He possesses a keen business acumen. Chiara offered a melodic laugh, a sound she had honed for such occasions. My husband is exceedingly astute. He invariably identifies the most advantageous opportunities. They were shamelessly misrepresenting the farm's valuation, inflating it by over $300,000. Yet I maintained my silence, preparing a roasted chicken with accompanying side dishes while absorbing every word. "And his mother?" inquired one of Chiara's companions. "Does she reside here with you?" An awkward pause ensued before Andre responded. "My mother is complicated. She has not been mentally sound since my father's passing. We are attending to her needs, but it is an arduous undertaking." "Oh, the poor dear," murmured another voice. "That must be exceptionally taxing for you." "It is," Chiara sighed with feigned melancholy, "but Andre is remarkably patient with her. I doubt I would possess his fortitude." I stood immobile beside the oven, finding the kitchen's warmth insignificant compared to the burgeoning ire within my chest. They were systematically painting me as a senile elderly woman, dependent on their benevolence, portraying themselves as martyrs, while I was depicted as the burden. Upon completing the dinner preparations, Andre entered to assess my work. He tasted the gravy and frowned. It's excessively salty. Prepare it anew. Andre, the gravy is perfect. I have prepared it in this manner for 30 years, and your father adored it. My father is no longer present, and our guests will not find it palatable. Recreate it, and do not contradict me in their presence. I was on the verge of protesting when Kiara appeared in the kitchen. She was attired in a sleek black ensemble, adorned with jewelry that likely surpassed the value of my automobile. She surveyed me with thinly veiled contempt. Is dinner ready? Our guests are awaiting. Almost, I murmured, commencing the preparation of a fresh batch of gravy. Excellent. And Andre mentioned you have been experiencing some difficulties with your memory recently. Her voice was saccharine, yet her eyes were as cold as ice. Is it true you neglected to turn off the stove yesterday? It was an outright fabrication. I had never forgotten to deactivate any appliance, yet I could discern the trajectory of this conversation. I did not forget anything, Kiara. She exchanged a significant glance with Andre. Well, we all age. It is natural for cognitive faculties to begin to decline. My mind is perfectly sound. Of course, dear. Her smile was patronizing. That is precisely why it is so crucial to have someone to oversee you. Throughout the meal, they treated me as if I were an invisible domestic. I served the plates, replenished wine glasses, and mended spills while they conversed as though I were non-existent. But when Andre began recounting the narrative of how he had persuaded his mother to purchase the farm, I could no longer remain silent. Actually, I stated from my position near the table collecting plates, I decided to acquire the farm because it represented the lifelong aspiration Marcus and I had shared. An immediate and palpable silence descended upon the table. Andre glared at me. Mom, the adults are conversing. I am an adult, Andre, and this is my home. Kiara cleared her throat nervously. Of course it is your home, Mrs. Ellington. I understand precisely what Andre intended, I declared, my voice possessing a newfound firmness that had been absent for days, just as I understand the exact reasons for all of your presences here. Kiara's father furrowed his brow, perplexed. Excuse me? Andre abruptly rose from his chair. Mom, I believe it is time for you to depart. Are you disoriented? I am not disoriented in the least. I addressed Kiara's father directly. Your son-in-law informed you that this farm cost $500,000, correct? The gentleman slowly nodded, clearly discomfited by the palpable tension that had seized the room. Intriguing, as I possess the purchase documents right here, indicating I paid $350,000. I retrieved the documents from my apron pocket and placed them on the table. Why do you suppose Andre would deceive you regarding that figure? Kiara visibly paled. Mrs. Ellington, I believe you are mistaken. I also have these, I continued, producing additional papers. Documents demonstrating that Andre borrowed over $80,000 from my late husband over the past 5 years. Funds he never repaid. Mom, be quiet, Andre bellowed, but it was already too late. The guests examined the documents with expressions of shock and bewilderment. The festive atmosphere had completely dissipated. And the most remarkable detail of all, I added, my voice now utterly calm and controlled, is that yesterday I happened to overhear a rather revealing telephone conversation between Andre and Kiara regarding their intentions to declare me mentally incompetent and subsequently liquidate my property. The ensuing silence was deafening. I could discern the rhythmic ticking of the kitchen clock and Andre's agitated respiration. Kiara attempted a desperate final maneuver. This is precisely what we sought to avert. As you can observe, she is experiencing one of her episodes. Andre, perhaps we should contact the physician. Episodes? I emitted a harsh laugh, a sound I hadn't heard escape my throat in years. You intend to persist with your fabrications even now? I retrieved my phone, the very device I had used to record the conversation they had engaged in earlier that afternoon, meticulously planning the intricacies of their scheme. Would you care to hear precisely what you discussed concerning me 3 hours ago? Andre lunged toward me, attempting to seize the phone, but I had already initiated playback. His own voice resonated through the dining room, clear and cruel a mother's fortitude. The old woman is completely under our control. By Monday, I will have the psychiatrist's papers. Within 2 weeks, this farm will be ours. Kara's parents simultaneously stood, their countenances betraying a mixture of horror and profound disgust. The other couples exchanged uncomfortable glances and began to murmur amongst themselves. Andre, Mr. Clayton stated, his voice strained, I believe we require an explanation. But Andre could no longer maintain his facade of the devoted son. His features contorted into an expression I recognized from his childhood, the visage of a child apprehended in a falsehood, prepared to resort to any means to achieve his objectives. She has no right to anything, he finally erupted. That money should have been mine. I am her only son. And there it was, the truth he had concealed behind insincere smiles and feigned solicitude. The truth Marcus had perceived but had never disclosed to me. My son did not love me. He never had. He had merely viewed me as a conduit for financial gain, and when that conduit began to dwindle, I became merely an impediment to be removed. The dining room had transformed into a silent battlefield. The guests remained immobile, like statues, bearing witness to a familial tragedy unfolding before their eyes. Andre breathed heavily, his fists clenched at his sides while Kiara frantically sought an escape from the predicament. Andre, Mr. Clayton murmured, his voice heavy with disappointment, what does all of this signify? My son ran his hands through his hair, a habitual gesture of nervousness he had possessed since boyhood. For a fleeting moment, I entertained the possibility that he might offer an apology, that some vestige of the conscience I had endeavored to instill in him for years might emerge. But as he raised his gaze, his eyes gleamed with a chilling malevolence. This implies my mother is a scheming matriarch intent on sabotaging my existence. He uttered the accusation with palpable disdain. All of this is a fabrication. That dialogue was selectively edited to present a false narrative. Selectively edited? A disbelieving chuckle escaped me, a harsh sound that reverberated in the chamber. Andre, enlighten me on the acceptable circumstances for orchestrating the complete disinheritance of one's mother and confining her to a care facility. Kiara rose with sudden haste, her chair emitting a grating sound as it slid across the wooden floor. This is utterly preposterous. Andre, let us depart. We are not obligated to endure these baseless allegations. Be seated, Kiara. The directive originated from Mr. Clayton. However, it was not a polite suggestion. It was an unequivocal command. Having presided as a judge for 3 decades prior to his retirement, his judicial bearing automatically resurfaced. I wish to hear the remainder of that audio recording. Father, you need not concern yourself with this, Kiara began, but a stern look from him effectively silenced her. I amplified the volume on my device. Kiara's voice was now clearly audible. My cousin can procure the necessary documentation for mental incapacitation for $5,000. He has connections with judges who will assist us. Mr. Clayton's countenance contorted, hardening like petrified stone. His wife, a woman of refined elegance who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the evening, brought a hand to her chest. Your cousin, the one who is a psychiatrist? He inquired slowly. The one you introduced to us last year. Kiara's complexion drained of all color. Father, I can offer an explanation. No, his voice cracked like a sudden whip. There is no justification for this. Yet, Andre was not inclined to relinquish his stance without a struggle. He advanced towards me with an ominous gait. For the very first time in my life, I experienced genuine apprehension regarding my own son. "Do you know what, Mother? You are entirely correct. Yes, I meticulously planned every aspect of it. And do you comprehend the reason?" His voice escalated, becoming shriller. "Because you absolutely deserve it. Because my entire existence has been an unbearable weight. Your father and I were compelled to consistently deceive you to shield your sensibilities. We had to feign your significance when, in reality, you amounted to nothing. Each declaration felt like a stinging blow, yet paradoxically their impact had diminished. It is challenging to articulate the sensation when one finally perceives an individual for their true nature. The Andre that I had cherished, the son for whom I had made such profound sacrifices, had never materialized. He was merely a phantom conjured by my imagination to fill the emptiness in my soul. "Did you know?" I inquired softly. "Of course he was aware. He is the one who instructed me on how to manage you." "Tell her what she desires to hear, Andre. It is far simpler than confronting her emotional turmoil. Do you truly believe he held any affection for you? He tolerated your presence because he lacked the courage to extricate himself from your life." That particular falsehood stung, as I recognized it for precisely what it was: a deliberate attempt to inflict pain. Marcus had genuinely loved me. The correspondence I had discovered served as irrefutable proof. He had withheld information about Andre to safeguard me, not out of a lack of affection. "Your father loved you, Andre," I stated mournfully. "That is precisely why he never revealed your true character to me, because he understood it would shatter me." "Father was an overly sentimental simpleton," Andre bellowed. "And you are considerably worse." It was at that juncture that one of Chiara's companions rose to his feet. He was an elderly, distinguished gentleman who had been an attentive, silent observer. "Permit me to interject," he remarked, directing his attention towards me. "But you mentioned possessing recordings of this clandestine scheme?" I inclined my head, my gaze still fixed on Andre, who was now pacing the room like a caged predator, "and documentation substantiating the outstanding loans, all bearing Andre's signature," I confirmed. The gentleman nodded thoughtfully. "I am a legal professional specializing in family law. The scenario you have just outlined encompasses several criminal offenses: conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted extortion, and potentially further charges." Andre froze mid-stride. "What precisely are you implying?" "I am stating that your mother possesses sufficient evidence to initiate criminal proceedings against both you and your wife." Chiara slumped back into her chair, the gravity of their actions finally dawning upon her. "Andre, you assured me this carried minimal risk. You claimed it was harmless. Be silent." Andre's furious retort was directed at her, but it was far too late. Chiara's parents exchanged glances, and in that instant, I witnessed the definitive moment they reached their decision. Mrs. Clayton spoke for the first time that evening. "Chiara, gather your belongings. We are departing this instant." "Mother, please," I said now. Her voice was resolute, brooking no argument. "And upon our arrival home, you will provide a comprehensive explanation as to how we could have raised a daughter capable of such perfidy." The other attendees also began to rise, their discomfort palpable, and their eagerness to extricate themselves from the awkwardness evident. Within a matter of minutes, the residence was devoid of guests, leaving only Andre, Chiara, and myself. Andre approached me one final time, and I detected in his eyes a quality that instilled in me a deeper dread than his anger ever could. An absolute coldness, as if he had decreed that I no longer held any existence for him. "This is far from over," he stated in a hushed tone. "I will devise a method to seize everything you possess. I give you my word." No, Andre? My voice, imbued with a newfound firmness, resonated more strongly than it had in years. This is unequivocally concluded. I retrieved another sheaf of documents from my apron, papers I had meticulously prepared after discovering Marcus's letters. These documents officially transfer the ownership of this estate into an irrevocable trust. I paused. You are not designated as the beneficiary. In fact, a specific provision explicitly excludes you from any inheritance should you attempt to have me declared mentally unfit or exert any form of manipulation upon me. Andre snatched the papers from my grasp, his eyes scanning them with frantic intensity. His expression shifted from bewildered shock to dawning comprehension, culminating in unadulterated rage. You cannot possibly do this. I am your son. No, I responded with a placidity that surprised even myself. A son does not endeavor to dismantle his mother. A son does not plot to pilfer her entire fortune. A son does not threaten to confine her to a nursing home to languish and die in solitude. Chiara, having been reading over Andre's shoulder, inquired, "What precisely does this entail?" "It signifies," I replied, "that upon my demise, this property and all my remaining assets will be bequeathed to a charitable organization dedicated to aiding elderly victims of familial abuse. Andre will not receive a solitary cent. You vindictive old crone." Andre hurled the papers to the floor. "You always knew, you always recognized that you were not a benevolent mother." His pronouncements bounced off me without inflicting any injury. It was as though I had developed an invisible shield against his malevolence. "You are correct on one solitary point, Andre. I was not an exemplary mother because a proper mother would have established firm boundaries. A proper mother would not have permitted you to devolve into this corrupted individual. They made their way towards the exit." Andre uttered a string of threats and imprecations while Chiara wept, attempting to placate him. However, before their departure, Andre turned back one last time. "This is not affection," he declared with a malevolent smirk. "This is sheer animosity." "No, Andre," I responded gently. "This is self-preservation." After they had departed, I found myself alone in my kitchen, enveloped by a tableau of unwashed dishes and partially consumed wine glasses. Yet for the first time in what felt like months, perhaps even years, I experienced a profound sense of tranquility. I had lost a son, but I had reclaimed something infinitely more precious, my own inherent dignity. And this time, no external force would succeed in stripping it away. The sanctuary. The days that followed that intense confrontation were unlike any I had previously experienced. It was as if I had awakened from a prolonged slumber, a dream spanning decades, wherein my existence had been dedicated to the welfare of others, leading to the erosion of my own self. For the first time in 60 years, my sole consideration was my own well-being, unburdened by the expectations of anyone else. On Monday morning, as I savoured my coffee on the veranda, observing the sunrise paint the hills with its golden hues, I detected the approach of a vehicle along the gravel pathway. My initial reaction was one of intense apprehension. Had Andre returned to fulfill his menacing promises? However, upon recognizing the distinctive azure hue of the car, my heart began to subside. It was the attorney who had been present at the dinner, David Hayes, a friend of Chiara's, who had borne witness to the entire tumultuous exchange. "Mrs. Ellington," he greeted me as he alighted from the vehicle. "I trust I am not imposing upon you at such an early hour." "Not at all," I replied, extending an invitation to join me on the porch. "Would you care for some coffee?" "I would be delighted." He settled into one of the wicker chairs that Marcus had acquired years prior. I felt compelled to visit, as I have been unable to cease contemplating the events of Friday evening. I served him coffee in a delicate porcelain cup that had belonged to my mother. I have a mother who is 75 years old, he remarked softly, and what I witnessed on Friday brought to my attention the profound vulnerability of elderly individuals when their own kin turn against them. I am not vulnerable, I countered instinctively, but he offered a gentle smile. No, you most certainly are not. In fact, I consider you to be one of the most formidable women I have ever encountered. However, that does not negate the necessity for legal safeguards. He elaborated on the likelihood of Andre and Chiara persisting in their efforts. They would undoubtedly explore alternative avenues to invalidate the trust, perhaps by alleging that I had been unduly influenced by another party to execute it. They are welcome to attempt that, but I possess a more astute strategy. His eyes glinted with a hint of playful mischief. What if we preemptively neutralize their impending maneuvers? That very afternoon, David returned, accompanied by a comprehensive team. A forensic psychologist tasked with attesting to my mental faculties, an accountant to meticulously scrutinize my financial records and confirm the absence of coercion, and a social worker specializing in elder abuse cases. This seems rather excessive, I protested, observing them as they installed a surveillance camera in my living room. Mrs. Ellington, David explained with remarkable patience, your son issued a direct threat against you. He explicitly stated his intention to devise a strategy to seize all your possessions. We must be thoroughly prepared. His assessment was, without question, accurate. That very evening, Andre initiated a telephone call. Mother. His voice conveyed a distinct shift, exhibiting an unusual level of control, as if he had diligently rehearsed his intended discourse. I have been reflecting on the events that transpired. I believe we both uttered sentiments that were not truly reflective of our deepest feelings. I meant every single word I articulated. Andre, Mother, I understand your current anger, but we are family. We can rectify this situation. Rectify what precisely? The fact that you conspired to defraud me, or the reality that you intended to confine me to a care facility to face my end in isolation? A prolonged silence ensued. When he finally spoke again, his voice had shed any pretense of remorse. You have 72 hours to rescind the transfer to the trust, or what, or you will discover the true extent of my capabilities when I set my mind to achieving a particular objective. He terminated the call before I could offer a response. David's foresight proved accurate. Andre had no intention of yielding. The following day, the harassment commenced. Initially, it manifested as incessant telephone calls at all hours. Andre oscillated between pathetic entreaties and overt threats. Subsequently, unsolicited visits became a regular occurrence. He would appear at my doorstep at unpredictable intervals, sometimes unaccompanied, other times with Chiara, invariably demanding an audience. Mother, open the door. I am aware you are inside. Mother, this is utterly absurd. I am your son. Mother, if you refuse to open this door, I will contact Adult Protective Services and inform them that you have been abandoned here. However, I remained steadfast. David had advised me to eschew any direct interaction with them, and each visitation was meticulously recorded by the security cameras he had installed. On Wednesday, Andre escalated his tactics. He arrived with an individual who introduced himself as a physician and vociferously proclaimed through the door that he possessed a court order to conduct an assessment of my mental state. Mrs. Bellington, the purported doctor, bellowed, your son is deeply concerned for your welfare. We merely wish to ensure that you are in good health. I promptly contacted David. There is no court order, he assured me after conducting a series of inquiries. That individual is not even a licensed physician. He is an actor whom Andre engaged. On Thursday evening, Andre brought additional personnel. He appeared with Chiara, her parents, and two men whom I did not recognize. This time they did not depart when I declined to open the door. Mother, Andre bellowed, These gentlemen represent adult protective services. They are here because we are worried about your well-being. I observed their actions from my bedroom window. The individuals purported to be officials were attired in inexpensive suits, and one of them was casually smoking a cigarette. Genuine officials would never conduct themselves in such a manner. "David," I whispered into the phone, "they have returned. This time they have brought individuals claiming to be representatives of the government. I am en route. Under no circumstances should you venture outside." However, Andre's patience had reached its limit. I heard a resounding impact, akin to something being forcefully slammed against the rear door. Then the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. They had broken the kitchen window. "Mother," Andre's voice emanated from within the residence. "Emerge now. We simply wish to extend our assistance." I retreated to my bedroom closet, my heart pounding so ferociously that I feared it could be heard. I listened intently as their footsteps echoed throughout the house, doors being opened, my name being called repeatedly. "We know you are here, Mother. Your vehicle is parked outside." Then I distinctly heard Kiara's voice. "Andre, this is inappropriate. We are committing an act of breaking and entering. Be quiet. She is my mother, and this is the home that should rightfully be mine." The footsteps drew progressively nearer to my bedroom. I was certain they would discover my hiding place when I heard the wail of sirens. David had alerted the authorities. "Police, everyone exit the premises with your hands elevated." I heard shouting, hurried footsteps, doors slamming shut, followed by an unnerving silence. When I finally emerged from the closet, I found David awaiting me in the living room, surrounded by uniformed officers. "Are you unharmed?" he inquired, thoroughly assessing me for any injuries. "I am perfectly fine. What has transpired with Andre? He has been apprehended for breaking and entering, property destruction, and harassment. Kiara, too." I sank onto the sofa, my body trembling from the lingering adrenaline. "How did you ascertain they were approaching?" "The surveillance cameras are linked directly to my mobile device. I witnessed every detail of the incident unfold." He presented his cellular phone, displaying the recorded footage of Andre smashing the window. This evidence, coupled with all the recordings of the telephone threats, should suffice to secure a permanent restraining order. That evening, alone within my residence, with the windows temporarily repaired and new locks installed, I experienced a profound realization. Andre had irrevocably crossed a boundary from which there was no possibility of return. It had transcended mere avarice or manipulation. It had devolved into tangible aggression. My son had transformed into a physical threat to my person. Yet, paradoxically, I did not feel fear. I experienced an emotion I had not encountered in decades. Empowerment, the power to dictate my own destiny, to protect myself, to assert a refusal and have it unequivocally respected. Andre had arrived with the intention of seizing all that I possessed. Instead, he had bestowed upon me the most invaluable gift imaginable, the opportunity to discover my authentic self, unburdened by any external influence, and this time no one would wrest it from me. Embracing serenity. 6 months subsequent to Andre's apprehension, I awoke on my farm, as I had each morning since, enveloped in an unassailable sense of peace. The sunlight filtered through the newly acquired curtains, adorned with cheerful yellow blossoms that Marcus would have undoubtedly adored. I no longer resided within a dwelling saturated with painful recollections. Now I inhabited a home that was entirely my own. The restraining order had been definitively formalized following the legal proceedings. Andre had been sentenced to a period of 1 year of probation for the offences of breaking and entering and harassment. Kiara, to my surprise, had cooperated with the authorities in exchange for a mitigated sentence. During the course of the legal proceedings, she had divulged further details concerning Andre's elaborate schemes, including his intention to incapacitate me with drugs, to fabricate a pretense of dementia. I had never imagined he would resort to such extreme measures. Chiara testified through a veil of tears. Initially, it was merely talk of financial matters, but then he became consumed by it. He accused you of absconding with his inheritance. Chiara's parents had completely detached themselves from the entire affair. Mr. Clayton, the retired judge, had personally extended an apology. We endeavored to instill a superior moral compass in our daughter, he shared with me, seated on the very porch where this entire ordeal had commenced. You bear no culpability for Chiara's choices, just as I bear no responsibility for Andre's, I replied. It had proven to be a therapeutic dialogue for both of us. This particular morning held a special significance. It marked the inaugural anniversary of the farm's acquisition, and I had resolved to commemorate it in a manner that Marcus would have wholeheartedly endorsed. David arrived punctually as promised. Over the preceding months, he had evolved from my legal counsel into a genuine confidant. He was accompanied by a woman named Sarah Jenkins, the director of an organization dedicated to assisting victims of familial abuse. Dahlia, Sarah remarked, surveying my property with keen interest, this is an absolutely perfect setting. Throughout the months of emotional recuperation, my thoughts had been consumed by the trajectory of my future. I was 60 years of age, in robust health, and possessed more than adequate financial resources for a comfortable existence. More importantly, however, I had acquired an experience that no one would ever willingly seek. I understood intimately the profound pain of betrayal by one's own family. Are you confident this endeavor will prove successful? I inquired as we strolled towards the stables, which I had meticulously transformed into intimate cottages. It will undoubtedly succeed, Sarah assured me with conviction. There are a considerable number of elderly women facing circumstances akin to your own, women who require a secure haven to reconstruct their lives. I had made the resolute decision to repurpose my farm into a temporary refuge for senior women who had endured abuse or abandonment by their families. It was not intended to be a large-scale institution or a complex organizational structure. It was simply conceived as a sanctuary where women, much like myself, could find solace, security, and the indispensable time for healing. The initial trio of residents arrived that very afternoon. Margaret, at 68 years of age, had been unceremoniously expelled from her home by her son following his marriage. My daughter-in-law deemed me a burden, she confided as I guided her to her cottage. 40 years of residing in that dwelling, and they cast me out like a stray animal. Elaine, 72 years old, had been subjected to financial exploitation by her grandchildren. They utilized my credit card to acquire a vehicle, she explained. When I confronted them, they dismissed my concerns, attributing them to senility and claiming I had granted them permission. Rose, the youngest of the group at 59, had managed to escape a distressing situation where her daughter had been surreptitiously administering drugs to control her behavior. I believed I was losing my sanity, she sobbed, until my neighbor observed my daughter discreetly placing something into my food. Listening to their individual accounts, I came to the stark realization that Andre's actions were not an isolated incident. Elder abuse perpetrated by family members was far more prevalent than I had previously imagined. However, I also apprehended a more crucial insight. None of us were compelled to endure such mistreatment. This is a sanctuary where you may allocate all the time necessary for your recovery, I informed them during our inaugural shared meal. There is no urgency, no pressure, only the profound process of healing. David had meticulously structured the legal framework, ensuring the refuge's financial self-sufficiency. The trust I had established provided the necessary funds for the property's upkeep and a modest stipend for each resident. This was not an act of charity, it was a measure of justice. The initial months presented considerable challenges. Margaret grappled with debilitating panic attacks. Elaine had developed a profound distrust of all financial institutions and legal documentation, and Rose was plagued by persistent nightmares. Yet, gradually, through unwavering patience and mutual support, we began to mend together. Margaret discovered an innate talent for horticulture, transforming a neglected plot into a flourishing vegetable garden. Elaine, who had previously worked as an accountant before her retirement, assumed responsibility for the refuge's financial affairs with a level of meticulousness that deeply impressed me. Rose, a former educator, initiated literacy courses in the adjacent township. Each of them rediscovered their intrinsic purpose. I too found mine. One tranquil autumn afternoon, as I sat on my porch, observing Margaret diligently tending to her garden, my telephone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Ellington, the voice belonged to a young, visibly nervous social worker named Patricia Wilson. My name is Patricia. I am a social worker affiliated with General Hospital. We currently have a 75-year-old woman in our care who has sustained injuries inflicted by her grandson. We were provided with your contact information as a potential refuge. Naturally, I responded without hesitation. When may you be able to transport her here? This afternoon. She has no other recourse and her grandson continues to issue threats. We shall be prepared to receive her. That evening, as I assisted our newest resident, a frail woman named Carmen, in settling into her cottage, my thoughts drifted to the arduous journey I had undertaken. A year prior, I was a 60-year-old widow who believed her sole purpose was to be an exemplary mother to a son who harbored no affection for her. Now I was the director of a sanctuary that had facilitated the rehabilitation of 8 women. I was an individual who awoke each morning with a clearly defined objective. I was someone who had discovered reservoirs of strength in places I had never conceived of existing. The final word. 3 weeks later, David arrived with significant news. Andre wishes to meet with you, he stated as we shared coffee in the kitchen. For what purpose? He claims to desire an apology. His probation officer indicates he has been actively participating in therapy and appears genuinely contrite. I considered the possibility for a fleeting moment. A segment of my being, the maternal core that had functioned for 38 years, experienced a faint resurgence of hope. Perhaps Andre had undergone a genuine transformation. Perhaps he had internalized the lessons derived from his transgressions. However, my thoughts then turned to Margaret, Elaine, Rose, Carmen, and the multitude of other women who had sought refuge here, each carrying similar narratives of hardship. I recalled the excuses I'd grown accustomed to, the hollow pledges of amendment, the second chances that invariably morphed into further avenues for harm. No, I ultimately declared, I have no desire to encounter him. Are you certain of that? Perhaps, David, I gently interjected, I've come to understand that absolution doesn't necessitate renewed contact with the individual who caused the pain. My heart has forgiven Andre, but that doesn't obligate me to reintegrate him into my existence. He acknowledged my words with comprehension. Would you like me to convey a message to him? Yes. Inform him that I wish him peace and recovery, but that he will attain it independently of me. That evening I resumed my customary vigil on the porch, observing as dusk settled and the lights began to illuminate the individual dwellings, where my residents were engaged in preparing their evening meals, immersed in their books, or simply savoring the tranquility that security affords. My mobile device buzzed with a text from Elaine. Thank you for providing us with a sanctuary where we can once again be our authentic selves. A smile graced my lips as I returned the phone to my pocket. Marcus had envisioned a rural estate where we could reside in serenity. I, however, had forged something superior, a haven where women who had been stripped of their peace could reclaim it. Andre had attempted to strip me of every possession, my finances, my domicile, my self-respect, my autonomy. The most precious gift I could conceive of was the chance to uncover my true identity, unburdened by anyone else's dominion. I had endured the loss of a child, yet I had discovered a kinship, a chosen family, one not bound by lineage but by genuine affection. And for the first time in 60 years, I experienced unadulterated liberty. Did my narrative resonate with you? From what city are you experiencing this story? Let us connect in the comments section. If you found enjoyment in this account, your support through a super thanks would enable me to continue sharing such narratives. Your gracious encouragement is deeply appreciated. I eagerly await your reflections on the story. Displayed on your screen are 2 additional life narratives that I highly recommend. My channel offers a wealth of further content. Please remember to subscribe. Until our next life story.